All right, Nick, Justin, we've done it. We've officially made it to 200 episodes.
Wow.
200.
200.
I feel old.
You're not 200 years old.
You're the oldest at the table.
But I've been around long enough for 200
that's
episodes.
true.
So if you're around for 200 of anything, it feels like
That
man,
is right. So how
a
many? So I mean, like, put it into just like context. Like, how many weeks, years is that we've been doing this now? I feel like I forget and I don't think about it. But
Well,
you're
it's
like, you know
one,
what?
It's one a week, Trevor, right?
It is,
so that's
right?
200
200
weeks,
weeks, which is how many years?
That's just under 4 years. So
That's-
208, unless
Right.
there's a leap year in there.
That's a great question.
Enough of those could
That's
be
true.
209, but
That's
208
true.
would be 4 years of this. Yeah.
We're close. We're really close. That's
So-
crazy. That's really crazy. I've been here. I think in
Just
like 2
over
weeks.
4 years.
Well, yeah, just like yeah, it is. It'll be 4 years. A couple weeks after this episode's released. It's crazy. And Justin, you've been here for almost. I mean, it's been a year and a half. But how many episodes?
1.72 years to be
Good math, man.
630 days.
You should push up your glasses. Like,
And,
wow.
So if you do the math on that, it's 89.44 episodes I've done. It's actually only 88.
We never record
to
a
be honest.
.44 episode,
I
just so
know.
everyone's aware. It's not like this special
So it was right
podcast
in
we
the middle of
have.
episode 111. Justin came in.
Yeah,
You'll
that's
hear
right.
there's a click, and that's our producer jumping on board.
Well, and actually there was 1 or 2 episodes I didn't do. So
That's true.
86
That's true.
episodes about.
Yeah, those are the ones I did, and I'm so sorry to
And
listeners.
one of those recorded through one mic.
Oh, right. Do you remember the PDL episode we did with Cal?
yeah, my
And-
mic was off. I'm trying
Yeah.
to hold on to that.
Yeah, yeah.
like, I tried to
was,
forget that one,
That was
thanks.
totally. That was
Sounded
totally
like I
me.
was shouting from
Yeah.
a coat closet.
I'm
here
It's just
too.
like, why can't you hear Nick? It's like, well,
Well-
Trevor only wanted Trevor to be heard.
And there was
basically.
also 2 episodes mid-pandemic where you were also home with
That's
you
true.
know, a new baby.
That's true.
And so rather than more producing them, I just recorded them over Zoom with guests, and I don't
That's
think
right.
Justin was involved in those either.
Yeah.
Even though you were on staff, like
right.
I kind of look back and wonder, why did we do that? Like, why didn't Justin set something up? And I don't know.
It's okay.
We were going with the flow. It was COVID.
Honestly, yeah. And if you've listened for 200 episodes, like you know, you're committed. So it's like we could totally screw even this episode up. You'll probably listen next week. So,
we appreciate that.
we
appreciate
absolutely
that.
do. Absolutely do. It has been it's amazing. 200 episodes is amazing. And it's, I mean, I'll speak for me. This is my favorite part of the job. This is my favorite thing that we get to do week in and week out. We get to record and have really and they're helpful for me conversations, you know, like they're things that I like talking about and like learning from. And so I'm thankful, Nick, you and I have been together you were off a couple episodes toward the beginning. I was, you know, I don't know, however many episodes ago. But we've been on about 198 together.
Yeah.
And it's been fun. And then Justin having you for 86, 88.44, whatever, 9, whatever, has been awesome too. And so just thanks for being a fun part of my job. So I appreciate you both just being a part of it.
Yeah, you know, I'm thinking like I jumped into this right after I was hired, and so it's been like fire hose. I had no idea what Pure Desire was, who Pure Desire was before I started, and so it's like fire hose. I'm listening to every episode, you know, 2 to 3 to 4 times, walking
Yeah.
through it, and
Right.
Yeah.
Because it was that bad and I needed that much editing 3 to 4 times.
well, you know, we got the audio version, the video version,
Totally.
the recording. It's like
Totally.
at least 3
Yeah.
just from that.
Totally. So for the 200 episode, we are going to mix it up a little bit. We're going to reflect on the past 100. So 100 or 101 to 199. And we're going to look at it, pick some of our favorites, talk about what we've enjoyed, what we've liked. Then we're going to look and maybe address a little bit. We are going to address some of the feedback and pushback that we've gotten on some of the things we talk about and how we talk about it. And then lastly, we're going to look at where we're going as a ministry, looking at the future, which is why this episode is titled What It Is, Favorites, Feedback, in the Future. So
Nice.
Great alliteration.
Thank
by
you.
the way.
Well,
Thank you.
And I think we should point out this is the first time we've allowed our producer Justin to sit at the table.
That is true.
Isn't that true? Like,
That is true.
Usually he has to be across the room or like at his own desk.
In a cage. In
Like,
a
so
cage.
this is really a
It's-
special
right.
episode. It's like, okay, you can join the adult table.
Oh my gosh! I was gonna say, here comes the condescending comment. I was gonna say it. I was gonna say, how does it feel
No,
to be at
for
the big boy
producers-
Suddenly I'm
table?
seeing a plastic table, with yellow
Yes.
legs.
I was just thinking though, like for producers around the world, this is a victory because
Oh,
every
yeah.
radio show that I've
Yep.
seen, like
Yep.
when they put it on TV, the producers like in their own little room
Totally.
behind glass and like.
Yep.
So you get to be right in it with us, Justin. We're grateful for that.
We're just breaking ceilings all around here.
Man, that's what we do.
Yep. Yep. All about it. All right. So let's jump in right now and start with the fun, the things that we've enjoyed, highlights from the last 100 episodes. Think full episodes, moments, maybe even some funny things. Just what have you guys enjoyed over the last 100 episodes?
Yeah, a lot of people comment on my intros and the things we've done there, and so that's
true.
a fun part for me of trying to get creative and think what's next and getting feedback from other people. And when we travel to events, I'm almost always having someone say, "Oh, you should do this," or they'll mention that. And I was thinking about those, the ones I've enjoyed in the last 100 episodes. I always enjoy it when I've stumped Trevor because he's such a wealth of knowledge on music and movies. If I can bring something up that he doesn't know, it's like, wow, that's like a victory. So I'm finding there's two areas that Trevor's a little weak in. It's like 1980s commercials. Like I brought up Robble from the McDonald's commercials.
I was born in '88.
And also
I have a good excuse. Yeah.
things that involve like 1980s Christianity, spirituality, jingles,
Yeah.
like churchy stuff. That's
Yeah.
not his forte either.
I didn't love Jesus till the '90s. So
That's right.
Yeah.
Do you
That's
track
right.
that too? So when you track the intro
Like
and the
keeping
episode number,
score?
does Trevor
Yeah.
win or lose
Yeah.
in that?
I
Yeah.
There's
There's a
haven't.
scoreboard in his
That would be
office. I've
interesting.
seen
He
it.
would be like in the 95% range though, because he usually knows the references. And I also enjoy the ones where I really feel like people probably walked away singing the song because they know like I
Yeah.
led into Little
Yeah.
Einsteins in one, I led into Veggie Tales.
Right.
And it's fun to think of that kind of listener connection of,
Yeah.
I wonder how many people today are walking around humming,
Right.
Little Einsteins are like, dang it, it's the
Yeah.
podcast. Like,
Stumbo.
I heard Nick sing it and I can't get it out of my head. And,
Right.
even if it annoyed you, I appreciate like those little connections. And the ones that just make you guys laugh where you have to stop. And I was thinking of when we found out there were two cats named after us, and I used the meowing of cats as an introduction. And we almost had to take like a break in that episode for Trevor to kind of
forgot about that.
get composure. Well, it is good to remember that right now there are two cats.
Listening, most likely.
Maybe at least terrorizing someone's house named Little Trevor and Little Nick, and
my only namesake in life.
good times. But no, in seriousness, I think
gosh.
when I looked back through kind of our roll of the 100 episodes, the ones that really stood out to me, the number of guests we had, that it's so neat to hear from people like Kurt Thompson, the author of Soul of Shame, Jenna Reimersma, author of All Together You, Paul Young in The Shack. And we interviewed them not just because they wrote a book, but because they had a perspective that we felt would add to the kind of things we want to talk about. Nate Larkin, Mo Isom, just people that they're not necessarily Pure Desire voices, but they are bringing a dynamic of recovery, of health, of freedom that we feel is valuable. And I've just loved their perspective. And then I also thought of the episodes. I just really like when it's you and I and Heather or someone else on staff, and we're not necessarily interviewing an expert. We're just getting to talk about a topic that is not always easy to talk about, because I look at that really as one of the purposes of this podcast. It's to have the conversations that a lot of people just aren't having or don't know how to have. And so hopefully in us just treating it like a normal conversation, it's helping others enter into that in a deeper way. And I think those are the ones that stand out to me.
That's cool.
Yeah, when I was thinking about episodes, I thought of the Mythbusters episodes. I think those are always some of my favorite. Just the idea of taking a common phrase or a common thought that we know is prevalent, when it comes to recovery and addiction, and then just busting that myth is really cool. The ones I wrote down, not in my church, sex addiction isn't about sex. Like some of these are just really powerful conversations that, I feel like we got into. Some of my other favorites were the Versus episodes, really putting in perspective accountability versus recovery groups. And then I wrote the healthy versus healthy versus sobriety.
Yep.
Just great
That was a good
episodes
one,
to
yeah.
really, break through some of those stigmas that,
Yeah.
we kind of carry, and really poor teaching throughout, our lifetimes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's really interesting because I'd never even thought of those as versus episodes. Like that's a theme, a genre,
good. That's good.
all of its own that we could develop
Yep,
because there
that's
are
right.
a lot of those.
That's why you guys
Ideas.
pay me the big bucks.
Yeah. Okay. So
Also-
oh yeah.
The spoon episode, like, you remember when you had a spoon? Okay, so my favorite part of editing is when we have a moment in the office. It's hilarious, right? And then I go back and I re-edit it, and I'm just like a schoolboy at my desk, re-laughing at what happened. And when I edited the spoon episode, I don't even know if we've released that
What
episode
happened
yet.
with the
I can't
spoon?
remember.
You had a spoon that you were stirring your hot chocolate with or something. It was sitting there, and then you hit it.
Oh.
And so the Trevor's like, why do you have a spoon? And it was this whole thing of like, I didn't expect
That's
it.
awesome.
Anyways, those kinds
Yeah.
of moments are really fun for me. Or our intros
Yeah.
with Dan and Jen often.
Gosh. Okay. I was gonna
It
say
takes
because
10 minutes to start the episode.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
You guys don't get
That's
to,
focus,
they don't get to
people.
hear
the
that part.
pre-episode.
Focus.
No, you like honestly, you would as a listener, you would love to hear
Yeah.
the pre-episodes. I would say Dan Howie and Ashley Jameson, both, they're like, when we welcome them and they say hello and how awkward and weird it is, it's perfect. I would not want it any other way. And then having Bob Vandermeer and Rodney Wright is always super fun. Their energy and their sarcasm and humor is great. I also put Mythbusters, the infamous group members. I thought that one was fun, and triggering because I'm all four of them. But like, I will never forget the IFS one we did with Jenna. Like, and I know we did it over Zoom, but all of her figurines that she had, and just like I've gone back and watched that episode a number of times. Yeah, and I don't know if you guys remember this. We had Ashley and Heather take over for 2 episodes.
Yeah.
And those were
yeah.
fun. I just listened to those again recently, and that was fun. We need to do that
Yeah,
again.
we do.
Definitely.
We do. We need to have the women's takeover.
Yes, we do.
That was cool.
Yes, we do. So yeah, we've had a lot of fun. That's been really cool. The last 100 episodes, and it makes me excited for the next 100 for sure.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, we're gonna keep at it.
Yes, we
Should
are.
the Lord tarry and this medium continue to be.
The Lord Terry.
I've never
That's going
heard
back.
that word.
That's a very
Yeah.
1980s Sunday
Okay,
school.
there you go.
know.
Yeah.
1980s Christian. At least I'm consistent, guys.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, we're going to keep going with these.
Yep.
And one of the things we wanted to do as we reflect on the episodes, when we talk for 45 minutes to an hour for 100 times, we are bound to say things that are challenging or
Yeah.
hard to swallow or
Right.
that, hit someone the wrong way. And we get some feedback. We hear from people. And on the flip side, we hear from a lot of people about how much this helps them, what
Totally.
they appreciate. So thank you for
Yeah.
all of you that
Yeah.
send in that. But many of you also send in things that concerned you or questions you had or some pushback. And we appreciate that too, because it helps us kind of hear through a different lens how something is landing for people. And one of the things we wanted to do today is tackle some of those things
Yeah.
rather than just pushing them aside and acting like there's never pushback, to talk through some of it and maybe bring perspective of why we bring up some topics the way we do or how we feel about it. And so, Trevor, why don't you kick us off with that? Like, what's some of the pushback we've had and how would you respond to it?
Yeah. So I wrote down a few things. The first one is, and maybe we could roundtable on this one too, is minimizing addiction. And its effects really when it's talking about trauma and woundedness and the way it affects a betrayed spouse. But then also just the way that we talk about it can often seem like we're blaming our family of origin or the things that happened to us when we were a kid. Growing up in the church, I think that for me, the perspective that I often hear from this pushback is we're not taking our sin seriously, or we're not calling it what it is, that it is sin instead of just this brokenness or responding to wounds. And in reality, I think we come at it, and again, I want you guys' perspective. I think we come at it in a way that most of the people we help and the people who listen come from that background. And so there's this preset of understanding that we've tried, and we've talked about this, like the Jesus way or the try harder, pray more, read your Bible more perspective. And that doesn't work. It didn't work for any of us. Like, that's for sure. And we've heard that story thousands and thousands and thousands of times. And so I think that what we're trying to do is just create a fuller picture. It's not that our brokenness in the area of sexuality isn't sinful. It is sinful and it is damaging, but we're also trying to come at it from a way where we're not shaming ourselves and other people. We're trying to give them a fuller picture almost like more language to better tell their story and understand what's happening.
Yeah, it's a challenging one because I think there's something in us that feels right about a message of like, this is sin, and if we just name it, and if we rebuke it, and we surrender it, and we count ourselves dead to sin, we are reconciled through Christ, and there's biblical truth to that that I think is a part of what we want to embrace. But what we've seen at Pure Desire, and for so many of us in our experience, we feel like that's the angle we have walked in, but it didn't necessarily create lasting freedom because we didn't know the addictive systems. We didn't understand the brain pattern. We didn't understand the realities of neurochemicals and the kind of things we talk about. And so I know there are episodes where we don't remind people, hey, the foundation of this is there is something here that God has called us to, a standard that we agree with and believe in. And we want to make that our focal point. But many of us haven't been able to make much progress there, and here's why. So maybe I think what happens is we make some assumptions about theology and scripture, like, of course that's the foundation, but we probably don't say it often enough because we do want to be clear, like, sexual addiction is a sinful thing. It is wrong, and it is a moral problem that we need to bring to God and surrender and find grace and forgiveness. So when we talk about addiction or the brain or wounds, or it's not in any way to nullify those things. It's more to explain how can all of that be true and yet I still do it. Because I think that's where most of us were caught, was like, I've surrendered this darn thing so many times, I feel like it's now pointless because it's obviously not working. What else am I missing? And so that's the question we're trying to answer. But again, if it ever seems like it's to excuse someone from responsibility, to say, oh, it's really not your fault, that would be an incorrect takeaway from our approach and the kind of things we're trying to encourage people in.
Yeah. And it's a 200 episode long conversation we've been having, right? It's not just 45 minutes in a vacuum, but it's really, there are episodes where that is heavy in there, and there are episodes where brain is heavy, and they're just different aspects. And so I think recognizing that 200 episodes in, there's a conversation that's been happening. And if you just jump into one and then blow that one up for whatever reason, that's not really fair. I mean, think about Paul. And if you just look at Paul where he says, I did things I didn't want to do and didn't do the things I wanted to do, but you never see that he also calls himself chief among sinners. Like, he's not dismissing his behavior. He's saying, in another place, he's also saying, I'm the chief among you, you know?
Totally.
I was thinking about that too, how these are conversations. These aren't like theological treatises that we've studied for hours to now bring a formal presentation on trauma or addiction. Like, we have experience and backgrounds and things we've studied, but we're corresponding with guests and one another, and we're trying to just talk. And sometimes when you talk, it's not always a well-formulated thought. And I know there's episodes, if I went back and listened, I wouldn't agree with myself.
Right.
100% of the time.
I'm with you.
And that's not to say we're trying to be in error, or it's just maybe to remind the listener, we're trying to have a conversation with you. And if some parts of it you're not sure about, like, that's okay, because we're probably not totally sure either. I think talking about it and conversing is actually part of how we wrestle through, what do we feel? What do we believe? And if we can all do that together and kind of have some grace for those moments like, I'm not sure that's, I agree with that. Or because I have those too, like, I'm not sure I said that the way I meant to, but it's recorded and on we go. And we'll get back to it on the next episode.
Well, and I would say that too when it comes with guests. I mean, we have different guests on that have different perspectives and come from a different maybe line of thinking or maybe even theology. That doesn't mean that, like, at the end of the day, we all agree all the time about all the things that were said. Like, if we do think that we personally said something wrong or need to address something, we have. But I mean, I just think about all the different perspectives we've had from all these different people who come from all these denominations and backgrounds that we're just trying to explore is the word that I feel like that comes to mind. We're exploring this topic and trying to explore what it looks like to better understand it and how to heal. Another big one, and this is one of the only negative reviews I've seen on iTunes, it's titled Gospel Poor, which as soon as I read that, I was just like, oh no. I'm just going to read it really quick. And then, Nick, I'm curious, what you would say to it. It's unfortunate with a platform that reaches vulnerable and hurting people. There could be so much done for the preaching of the gospel and the restorative truth that abundant grace is our only salvation. Behavior modification methods, tools, tips all fall short of the throne of grace. Emphasizing anything above that is chasing a Band-Aid, a false hope ourselves. There's certainly a place for human practicality, but the gospel should take up the majority of each conversation on this show. Right now, it's the occasional supporting actor. Oops, sorry, guys. Amidst talks sprinkled with Christian language on this podcast. White knuckling isn't worth comparing to falling into the arms of Jesus daily, Matthew 3:5. We snack on human level hope when we could be hungering for righteousness and finding fulfillment in Jesus. I'm afraid these talks delay such surrender. Be a self-help podcast if you'd like, and many will still be helped, but there's no need to claim Jesus if he doesn't have the place of king and father.
Yeah, I mean, I think anyone that's listened to us very long knows that we're not into behavior modification, self-help, or white knuckling, that we're not just giving some human behavior tools. So I think that's a little exaggerated, but I understand where they're coming from, that we don't spend all our time talking about the Bible and scripture verses.
It's not preaching sermons.
It's certainly the foundation. And I get where they're coming from, especially if, in some of our faith traditions at church, there is kind of that dynamic of, hey, anytime you preach any sermon from anywhere in the Bible, it ends with Jesus and the cross. And I think that's a neat way of preaching, and I think there's a lot of value in it. But I've also sat in a lot of churches where it feels like the preacher's like making an artificial turn to like, well, and we need to include how this is biblical in Jesus. And so what I would say to that, we find that the biblical piece is the foundation that we're starting from. And that for most of us and most people that come to Pure Desire, that's not what they're lacking. That most of us have sat in churches where we hear Jesus and we know Jesus and we love Jesus. And my story is like, for all these years, like, how do I just surrender well enough to Jesus and receive his grace and being prayed for at altars? And like, I was taking that gospel-centered approach, and there was a lot of rightness to it, but still struggling. And so I think what we have found through Pure Desire is what can we help people understand about their faith journey that they might be missing to add to the deep foundation and eternal truths of Christ and salvation. Right.
Not replace or take that spot, but to...
So it's fair in that we maybe make some assumptions that when someone comes to the podcast, they are getting Jesus through their church. They're hearing messages about grace and salvation and walking in surrender, and that they're actively participating in that. But what they're likely missing is the conversations we're having. And so we feel like for our listeners, we don't know that we need to double down on the Jesus message they're getting through their church. And there's so many, let's be honest, there are so many podcasts, there are so many books, there are so many places you can go to get a great gospel-centered, let's lean into Jesus. And I'm thankful for that. But how many places are there that have a biblical worldview that are really talking about addiction, the brain, recovery? And so we're not trying to replace any of that. We're trying to build on that foundation to maybe add to the conversation in a way that a lot of us had never even thought about until someone, said to us, hey, have you considered the way your brain is wired for addiction? It's like, what? And that's not to in any way supersede or replace scripture. It's to add to that understanding of, like we've already said, why do I do what I don't want to do?
I think too that there are often times where it's like, some people are going to approach it and it won't be biblical enough for them. And other people are going to approach it and won't be clinical enough for them, with the wide variety of people and backgrounds and trauma stories and all these things that are represented in our listeners. It won't be one or the other. And so again, it's a part of a large conversation, and each episode, it can't be taken just by itself. But honestly too, like, some of the worst sermons or all of the worst sermons are the ones that don't have some practical application I can walk home with. And every podcast, I feel like people can walk away knowing, here's the next steps for me. Here's what I do with this information. And I think that's helpful for people to continue.
What else, Nick? Have you had any pushback or feedback that you think we should address?
Yeah, I think we get a little bit of pushback that you and I, Trevor, as hosts are men, and that our story is more on the struggler side, and that we're not taking seriously enough the betrayal trauma, the wounds of spouses. And I want to, I guess, say we hear that. We understand, like, as men, we're limited in our perspective, and that's why we try to frequently have on Heather and Ashley and Jen and outside voices, because it's not 100% our perspective. And I think because of that, we've gotten pushback that's like, well, you're too lenient on the addict, or you're downplaying their behavior. You're not taking it serious enough. And what I recognize is there's kind of a spectrum where on one end you might put the real extreme betrayal trauma perspective that would say every guy who's ever lusted is an addict and is an adulterer and could be divorced if they want, and every spouse is a victim and has been wounded. Like that's, and there's some voices out there that are really on that side of like pretty extreme. The other end of the spectrum is kind of it's no big deal. All people do it. We're just going to struggle. Yeah. You know, addiction's
Dismissive.
not even a thing. Yeah, dismissive.
Yeah.
And I think we would look at that and say, well, either end of the extreme is unhealthy and unbiblical and unfair.
Right.
But whichever side we've maybe had more experience with, whether it's being the struggler or the betrayed spouse, we might find we lean towards kind of one of those poles. And so we're hearing through that lens where it's like, whoa, you're dismissing, you're downplaying. It's like, well, I can see how it sounds that way for you, but maybe to the struggler, and that could be male or female, maybe the one who's in addiction, to them it's coming across as empathy and understanding. And an area of their life where they've battled deep shame and beating themselves up repeatedly, to have someone say, we understand, and here's maybe something to help you recognize why you do what you don't want to do, that's helpful. But on the flip side, I would also just want to say to our listeners, thank you for that feedback. Because as two men, and with Justin joining us as three guys, we want that feedback. We want to recognize this is a people problem, and it affects men and women, and spouses and strugglers. And so it is our heart's desire to be balanced, to understand both sides. And so when you feel like we haven't represented one of the sides well, whichever side you're on, let us know, because it's helpful. I think it refines the way we talk about things and can help us see, oh, here's a gap. Here's something we didn't really address. So again, if you kind of feel like, oh, they don't get where I'm coming from, well, keep listening, because we'll probably have a guest on that totally gets where you're coming from.
And I mean, with the point of the feedback, like a lot of the listeners, you guys send in emails to us with suggestions. I mean, those go directly to my inbox. If you're wanting to have a conversation with me, don't just respond to one of those. Like if you have a podcast recommendation, do it. But I think that's the cool thing about this podcast, and the fact that it's ongoing, is if we have a conversation, it's like, oh, well, I don't feel like this perspective was reflected in that conversation. You know what's great? In 10 episodes, we can do another one, and here it is. Here's that other perspective. Here's that other side. And that could be male or female. And we've done that. We've come back and be like, you know what? Because of some of the comments we got, let's come to the other side of this and let's talk about it. Like, I mean, you talk about things like disclosure and honesty. I know, Nick,
another
you wrote
versus episode.
Right. Totally. Right. Yeah, that's true. And, you think about one conversation is never going to be enough to fill that out. And so we look at this as that ongoing conversation. Like, we're going to do some more Mythbuster episodes, FAQ episodes. We don't think that's going to answer the question. And then it's like, okay, we're never coming back to this topic again. It's this ongoing thing, and we're happy to do that. I mean, if you look at our episodes too, like how many episodes have we had in the faster scale? A lot, because it's something we need to keep coming back to. And so I think with that too, we are not the type of people or organization that are just going to say, no, we've already established this and addressed this. It's, okay, we see the perspective. Let's look at it in a new way and continue the conversation.
Yeah.
As someone who sits in the background on 89.44 episodes.
That's not true. That's not true. You were on camera for one other one.
That's true.
Okay, so 88.44.
I don't know if that math would work out, but yeah. So, I mean, as somebody who sits in the background, I can just say I get to see a lot of the behind the scenes stuff, all of it. And to hear how you guys always are working hard to bring in all perspectives. What often isn't seen is sometimes when something's shared and it's like, let me redo that because I realize how one-sided it was, And so then we redo that part because we recognize in the moment, but we can't catch everything. And like you said, like we just did a whole series, Tools for Betrayal. We are working hard. You are working hard to come back around to, every side, every angle, male, female, betrayed, addict, all of those different things. And even like, how to talk with your kids. Like, what does that look like, generationally? And so grace, I think, is a really helpful word here for that.
Totally. Yeah. And I think that we we genuinely do not believe ourselves to be experts in this area, that we know everything and that our perspective is the only one that matters. I think that we are just offering what we have learned, and what Nick and I and our guests, Justin, you included, share is not just what Nick or Trevor or our guest thinks. It tends to be a collective stuff. Like if there's conversations about betrayal where, Nick and I, we've never experienced that. We'll have conversations with our female staff who have and said, hey, what about this? We're going to talk about this question. Do you have any input or feedback? And so it's something that we don't view ourselves as it's our perspective and no other is welcome at the table. It's really trying to flesh it out.
Yeah, one of the other things where we've had pushback, and you mentioned it, but I just wanted to come back to, is where listeners have maybe had disagreements with the theological perspective of guests, and sometimes it's not even what the guest shared on the podcast. It's just something the guest is known for in their books or outside of the podcast. And we'll feel like, did you know this person says this? And did you know they believe that? And is that what Pure Desire believes? And I appreciate the concern, and I appreciate that listeners want to have accurate theology. But maybe to just reemphasize what you said, that we don't have people on because we 100% agree with them. And so we're saying, well, here's someone we endorse 100%.
Yeah.
It's that we've heard, like with Paul Young, we'd heard his story.
Yeah.
And we felt like his story needed to be shared. And he's got theological beliefs that make me raise my eyebrows, and it's not how I view things. But I really appreciate his story and his openness and his willingness to see he had to face really messy stuff, and it really hurt people he loved. And he really needed to understand God's grace for himself and not just beat himself up as a dirty little, horrible sinner.
Right.
To me, that's redemptive. And so if a listener heard Paul Young's name and you've got strong theological convictions about why he's wrong, recognize we had just as many people on the other side that wrote in saying, this deeply touched my life. Because I viewed myself through that same negative lens that Paul talked about, and I felt God used it to create some freedom and release. And so that to me is that's why we do it. Not because we're endorsing Paul or Jenna or Kurt or all the guests we've had, but it's because they've got an angle that we feel contributes to the conversation. So, hopefully we never have anyone on here that we just feel is a blatant, atheist or anti-Christian, or I don't think we're ever looking to do that. No. But we'll have people on here we don't agree with. And so if for a listener, you don't like that, I mean, I don't know. I guess I'd say we're sorry, but it's going to be hard for you to find a place where you agree 100% with everyone you're listening to. And if that's our standard, we're going to really have a hard time learning and growing. And so I hope people would just be open to that we want to learn from people, even if we don't agree on everything.
Well, and also, and I don't mean this to be like a passing comment, but there are 199 other episodes you could also listen to. It's not like if that one person's perspective is not helpful for you, it's okay. I mean, you can pick and choose. We don't need you to listen to all of these or listen to them in order. Like just the fact that you listen means something to us as we continue the conversation.
Yeah.
Hey, Justin, I know this is your first time as a table guest. Will you please ask the last question?
Yes, Dad. Okay, so what are some things that our faithful followers can look forward to in the future? Ooh, I reworded to add in some Fs.
Wow.
Podcast, courses, products. What can our listeners expect from Pure Desire?
Yeah, well, as we've already talked about, we're going to continue with the podcast. We've got, no plans to change helping in this way.
My job security feels good about that.
Well, good. Oh, some things we're working on, from more of the resources side. We're recognizing more and more the need to have digital products, digital workbooks. For some people, that's just their preferred learning method. And even though I feel, and the brain science kind of backs it up, that writing something by hand creates better learning and lasting change. I get that the digital world we're in, some people will not, it's just not going to work for them. Yep. And especially for those that live outside of the US, access to the material, if it's only hard copy, is limited. And so within the next calendar year, we're really looking at having all of our major workbooks available digitally. And I think that's exciting for some people.
Yeah.
And another area of growth, just continuing to look at how can we get the material into other languages, because as it's available digitally, that also opens up, if we just had the translation, we could, within that same kind of digital framework, we could put up the German or the French or whatever else. And a big part of that is because of how many people we hear from that say, there is nothing in our language.
Right.
And we feel like in the US, there's not enough resources, but at least there are resources, you know, and I hear from people in Europe and Asia that just say, there is nobody talking about this. And can you help get in our language? So that's something that we're very passionate about. We're also right now in the process of kind of revamping and updating the workbooks. And so 7 Pillars is going to be coming out soon with a video course attached to it and a lot of updated stuff in there. And then Betrayal and Beyond is in the works right now as well, of really looking at how do we include more language around betrayal trauma that really helps a woman up front feel heard and valued, and that her fears, emotions, and the stuff that's happened in the marriage is really validated, that she can kind of come to a place of mental health and safety enough to look at, okay, what's next? And so some of that has been missing, and we're excited to see that updated. Also creating, Unraveled is our workbook for women who battle their own sexual addiction or struggles, making a college-aged female version of that would be more for single women. So kind of I don't know if I'd say simplified, because it's still going to be it's a challenging.
Like Living Free is to 7 Pillars. This will be to Unraveled.
So a version that really is specifically for single women. And so excited to have that moving forward. And, then a big project that we've had people have been asking about for a long time, and we're like, oh, we're working on it, is to really take our group leader training that we would offer like at events, or that, our groups team has done online for different churches, to turn that into a video course that is accessible by anyone, anywhere. And we're hoping to do that by the end of the year. So that'll be exciting to know that a church or a group could just say, hey, if you need to be trained as a leader, go watch these 8 sessions online. And at the end, you get a little, certificate that says, I've gone through the certification, how to lead a PD group. And I think for a lot of people, that will just help create some consistency in their group experience and in how new leaders get trained.
Totally. Yeah, and I mean, another thing too, just this podcast, we're going to continue having different guests, different experts, different voices to come in and be a part of it. One of the pushbacks, and I don't even think I've told Nick this yet, but we posted something on social media about the Enneagram and got a lot of pushback on social media. But I'm having conversations right now with an Enneagram expert that talks about recovery and betrayal and how that can interact with, this personality tool. Or this, I would even say it's like a spiritual formation tool in a lot of ways, but things like that, like we want to expand the conversation and offer different ideas and tools for people. I think that's one thing, but then also inside of this favorite part of my job doing the podcast, I also think about what are new series we could do. I mean, we just came up with a new one, like we need to title it like Versus, you know what I mean? But then also just other ideas of what we can do, different themes, different topics. I will say right now, we're going to do something along the lines of like movie or TV characters in recovery. And that's going to be a lot of fun. Like just looking for also fun and creative ways to have more conversations to help people. Because we also enjoy this. We love doing the podcast. And we've got a lot of cool stuff coming.
I can't believe you guys didn't mention Team 58 and continuing to expand that program. Team 58 obviously being our recurring donor program, and people deciding that they want to come alongside Pure Desire and help us to go into other countries, help us to go fully digital companions, just to clarify, but like people who just, love what is happening here, love that lives are being changed, and want to be a part of that mission and vision.
Totally.
Team 58, continuing to do that, continuing to add value to those people and really build a culture and a community around the people who are partnering with us in that big way. So
absolutely.
That's all I got, guys. I sit behind the camera. So.
Well, I appreciate you saying that, Justin, because I was thinking about it this morning about how many of our listeners, they're regular parts of this show that they tune in. And I know for a lot of you, you're here because this is helping you. It's changing your life. And maybe my appeal to you say, why wouldn't this be a ministry then that you would invest a little bit of your resources in to say, I'm a part of this? I mean, if you're listening every week and it's touching your life, we don't want you to stop giving to your church or pull out of anything you're doing, but we've just seen the power and influence that people who give $20 a month have when that gets multiplied. And, we think about, we've got thousands of people every week that download these. And if even 1 out of every 10 of them said, hey, I'm going to become a $20 a month partner, our ability to take this message to other countries, to create more, like it just would exponentially begin to grow. And so as you hear that, that's my challenge to you. Like, could you join us? Could you be a part of this? And don't think, well, I don't need to be the 1 out of 10 because then no one does it. Just jump on. And Team 58 coming out of Isaiah 58, that Isaiah makes this promise that says, as your salvation and healing comes, you will be known as those that rebuild the broken walls, that rebuild the fallen cities. And that's what all of us are doing together, the listener and host alike, that we're helping people rebuild their lives and restore marriages. And it starts with our own lives and marriages, but then as God does that work in us, it's coming before the Lord to say, God, how can you now do this through me? And we do it through our story. We do it through engaging with others in group or maybe helping lead, and we can do it by our finances. So Team 58 being that sense of we're all in this together to make a difference in the world. And listener, we need you. We were glad that you listen and get a lot out of this.
Totally.
And we'd love to have you be a part of Team 58.
Yeah. We'll make sure we have the link to join Team 58 in the show notes. You also will get a little bit of swag. It's going to be a good thing.
There is.
Okay, so listener, thank you so much for listening to our podcast. We honestly feel honored and thankful that we can put this content out and that it can be helpful to you. Recently had a friend tell me that our voices are basically in people's ears every single day, even while we're asleep, because there are different countries that people are listening to this, right? And so it's just an amazing platform and opportunity, and the support and feedback we get from you is so helpful, continues to really push us to have conversations and explore more of how we can better do this. And we're so thankful. Here's to the next 100 episodes. Get to 300. Thanks guys for being with me.
Yeah. Thanks. And I appreciate that. Really, like 200 episodes, this is like a celebration of the listener. Because if people weren't listening, we would have stopped doing it. And the truth is, people keep listening. They keep telling us it's helpful. And so thank you to all of you that have said this is helping me and have sent your feedback, have sent your intro ideas, have sent your, hey, have you ever thought of doing a podcast on this? I mean, I can't tell you how many of our podcasts are because someone or actually multiple people probably said, hey, could we get an episode on this?
So true.
Obviously that there's not time or space to get everybody's suggestion in, but a lot of our episodes are because you listeners have asked for it. So thanks for being a part of this. And we're celebrating you today as much as we're celebrating the podcast.
Totally. Yeah. As always, wherever you're at on your journey, Pure Desire is here to help create a roadmap for healing. If you or someone you know is impacted by sexual brokenness, go to puredesire.org and let's start the healing journey today. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast. Each week we put out new content to help you on the road to freedom from the effects of sexual brokenness. And lastly, never stop being healthy.